Happy Monday, friends. Here is your weekly update for the week of May 18th. I want to begin by giving you some stats, talking a little bit about what's going on in our city as far as our continued battle against COVID-19. So here's some stats. Yesterday, Douglas County performed a record number of COVID-19 tests. Over 1,400 people were tested in a 24-hour period. That's really good news because it shows our testing capacity continues to increase. As of right now, in Douglas County, there are 2,414 confirmed cases of COVID-19, 127 people hospitalized, which is about 5% of confirmed cases. And in the state of Nebraska, there's about 10,348 cases with a statewide death toll from the disease of 123 or 1.1%. So statistically, what we're seeing in Nebraska tracks with everything that we've been seeing research-wise coming from not just the United States, but around the world as we continue to learn about this disease. As of Sunday, we're using 27% of our hospital beds locally for COVID-19 and about a third of our ventilators. So we're well within capacity hospital-wise. 412 residents of Douglas County have recovered from the illness. So that's really good news. So that's just a quick snapshot of where we are locally. Now, last Friday, Governor Ricketts gave a really helpful analogy that I thought was helpful for us in thinking about how we've approached the last few months. He basically said this: hey, look, if we wanted to end traffic fatalities in Nebraska, we could reduce the speed limit everywhere to 5 miles an hour. Now, that would be a little bit unrealistic, but it would certainly end any and all traffic fatalities. He said, essentially, that's what we've done with the coronavirus. Because of the initial risk we were perceiving, we just sort of slowed everything down to 5 miles an hour. And he said, what we're trying to figure out how to do right now is where to set the appropriate speed limit to sort of slowly ramp back up. And what he said is, we're not going to slam the accelerator down and go fast. We're going to try to find what the right speed is. And so that's why you see in our state sort of a slow, phased, gradual reopening, trying to allow businesses to open and loosen up restrictions a little bit in a way that sort of gives us a chance to see how does this affect how the disease grows, and do we stay under where we need to stay for our hospital capacity. So that analogy of sort of slowing everybody down to 5 miles an hour and then gradually picking up speed again is a good analogy for what we've had to do over the past few months. And it's a good analogy for sort of what we've done as a church as well, right? If you think about what does it mean to slow down to 5 miles an hour as a church, it means I preach to a camera and you watch online in your living room because we're trying to totally stay away from each other. What you've seen as a church is we've slowly sort of gradually moved back toward normal. We started with an FM parking lot service for a few weeks. For the last 2 weeks, we've done an open air outdoor service, which we'll do again next Sunday. And then, as you know, May 31st, our plan is to gather back in the building again with different restrictions, right? Practicing sort of 6 feet social distancing between family units and minimizing our capacity in our rooms and having no kids ministry. So these are all ways that we're trying to sort of find the appropriate speed, not just in society as a whole, but in our church as well. I thought that was a helpful metaphor. I hope that's helpful to you in sort of thinking about how we're sort of approaching moving back into normal life. And again, assuming that we continue to see good signs locally, I think we'll continue to see sort of incremental steps toward more normal opening. Now, the governor said the plan here in Nebraska is assess, test, trace. Okay, so we're going to move from sort of a quarantine model of like, hey, let's shut everything down, to assess, hey, who is at risk for the disease, test, and then trace and isolate people who are actually symptomatic or actually show that they have the disease. So assessment-wise, I mentioned to you a few weeks ago, they opened up this Test Nebraska site, and that site asks you a bunch of questions. It asks, hey, do you have any symptoms of COVID-19? Do you work in healthcare? Are you a first responder? What that's trying to do is to prioritize who should get the immediate tests. Okay, so the answer is anyone who has symptoms, anyone who works in healthcare, anyone who's a first responder. And I think they included anyone who works in like meat packing or food processing industries, because obviously that's been a place of high risk. Okay, so if you answer yes to any of those questions, you're going to immediately get a test for COVID-19. If you answer no, you're probably not as high a priority for testing. And the point is they're trying to ramp up testing capacity. As I mentioned, in one day they did 1,400 tests. I think the governor's goal is to get to doing about 3,000 tests a day. So that should give us the capacity eventually to get to the place where, man, lots of us can get tested and find out, do we have the disease, do we not have the disease? And that can move us toward a sort of a healthier way of approaching who should self-isolate for 14 days in order to allow the virus to run its course. Okay, so that's where things are headed in the sort of weeks and months to come. I just want you to have all that data for two reasons. One, I want to try to keep you informed. And two, I want you to see that what we're trying to do as a church sort of mirrors what we're trying to do as a society. We really want to be faithful Christian citizens living in our society and in our state, living with wisdom, obeying the authorities, not living in fear, but trying to approach wisely and thoughtfully, hey, how do we sort of treat this disease with all the seriousness that it deserves, and also move back toward some degree of normalcy in the same way that the world around us is seeking to do that. So that's a little update on your sort of coronavirus world. Now, as you know as a church, really the only thing we're doing right now is functionally gathering on Sundays and inviting you to gather with your gospel communities during the month of May. And because of the 10-person limit, even that has to look a little different. My hope is that as we move forward in the summer, we'll get a little more freedom to do some other things. But right now, our life as a church is pretty simple. So here's the one piece of sort of good news that I want to leave you with, and that is that as we move back to worship on May 31st in the building, our team has also figured out and done the research and got the equipment to figure out how to live stream our services, and we will begin doing that, assuming everything goes okay technically, we'll begin doing that on May 31st. So what we want to open up is the opportunity that if you can't join us in person, you can still have sort of a live kind of experience of like you're in the room, only watching behind a screen. During early on in the pandemic, we didn't want to do that. We just wanted to say, hey, let's just do living room liturgy. Let's do a pre-recorded sermon. Let's sort of lean into sort of worship in the household. But as we move back toward gathering together, we really want to make it an opportunity for those of you who can't join us in person to still feel like you're in the room. And so I want you to know our team has been hard at work solving those problems and challenges and figuring out what we need in order to do that. And I'm excited that we'll get to test that out in the next couple weeks and hopefully roll that out on May 31st. So I'll have more information about that for you as we go forward. Until then, man, I hope you have a great week. I hope you're enjoying thinking about the parables of Jesus together, and I hope they're sort of provoking you. And so even as you think moving through this week, the simple, small places of faith and obedience in your life, I hope you remember how much those matter for the sake of the kingdom of God. Pastor Justin will preach next Sunday on the parable of the workers in the vineyard, and I look forward to being there with you outdoors behind the building again on Sunday as we worship Jesus together. So I'll see you then.